Today's episode of C64 Gaming history for 1988 is special, as you get to meet my new assistant. We grew up together and we've even fought crime in the kindergarten and around the monkey bars together. But that's something you learn by watching and not listening into this overly long intro. Mainframe is an arcade adventure platformer where you have to battle enemy droids sent by Tri-Complex 3, seemingly world's greatest computer that at some point decided that humanity was an error in its programming and had to be eradicated. So it created countless battle droids and weapons to do just that. And as per every single time we've covered situation like that, you are my No. I recently employed Batman as my assistant in making these videos, as he's the only one I can actually afford and we've been friends for years. But he's not been very helpful, he doesn't stop me from saying things like that or any other crazy stuff. All he really does is just keeps telling me who he is. I mean, I'm Batman. You're Batman, we're all Batman, whatever, but do what I pay you for, man. Anyway, what I really meant to say before I got carried away and my now soon-to-be former assistant didn't stop me was that you are the only one who can deal with the villain of the game. Launching from an orbital station in your specially designed power suit, you platform your way through various buildings, mountains, caverns and Tri-Complex's high-tech bases. There are a lot of secrets and gameplay mechanics hidden in the mainframe to discover, and getting over the initial high entry point will reward you with enjoyable and unforgettable C64 gaming experience. Kinda like Batman's next failure will reward him with his unemployment check, which will still be more than he gets here. Matterhorn Screamer is vertically scrolling platformer where you help Goofy, yes, that Goofy, this nice Goofy, so you help him climb the famous Matterhorn mountain in Switzerland. Along the way you have to collect flags for points and they reward as many of these as the number written on them says, and avoid environmental obstacles and other dangers. So you'll be dodging falling icicles, slipping on loose edges, also snowmen and mountain goats to name a few. So, as you see, concept-wise it's not a complicated game at all, but it's actually pretty playable nonetheless. And if you enjoy platformers, it's definitely one to complete. Not sure how replayable it is, but it's worth going all the way through at least once. Sensible Soccer was by many considered the very best football/soccer game on the Amiga. And Microprose Soccer, coincidentally also developed by Sensible Software a few years earlier, is often treated as the best game in the genre for C64. And not for no reason. The game can be played either normally or in indoor mode. It was the first football game to introduce bending the ball trajectory after it's kicked, rain that also prolonged the slides and changed the way ball behaved on the field, and top-down bird's-eye view. But most importantly, it was fast and frantic and demanded not only skillful play but also near-instantaneous reactions. Microprose Soccer features leagues where up to 15 players can play on a single system, there's a World Cup option that's equally if not more fun, and you can even make up to 16 of your own teams, effectively creating a league of your own. I was never very good at Sensible Soccer and I'm not great at Microprose Soccer either, but it never stopped me from playing or enjoying it. So if any of that sounds like fun to you, try it out. Pool of Radiance is SSI's party-based role-playing game with tactical turn-based combat set in Forgotten Realms universe. Also a first title in so-called Gold Box series of RPGs. Traversal and exploration are in the first-person perspective with party's current view displayed in the top left corner, while in combat the game switches to tactical turn-based top-down view where each member of the party is commanded separately. And I have to say that this part of the game was always my favorite because unlike majority of RPGs of the time, it does not stick to the first-person real-time combat and allows for more strategic approach to each encounter. Obviously at the start, before the beginning of the game, you create your party of up to 6 characters by choosing their race, gender, class and assigning their ability points, like in real-life D&D campaign. Pool of Radiance scored quite high on all systems it was released for and it came out on anything that could run it at the time, 8 or 16-bit, and with time and follow-ups it gained even more popularity. It's not the easiest game, but it's a very fun one if you give it enough time. Oh, and my assistant just asked me to tell you that he's Batman, and also that he always played as a man-bat, so not to give away his secret identity. Go figure. Ocean Ranger is a naval frigate simulator. USS Ocean Ranger is the newest of its kind and most sophisticated that there ever was, at least in the universe of this game. And it's a wonderful machine that is capable of tracking and destroying targets on and beneath the surface and even in the air. And guess who gets to lead this technological beast in combat? Yep, you. So better prepare, as it's not going to be an easy one. The game features 4 theaters of action and they are from easiest to toughest, Bering Sea, Southeast Asia, Central America and Persian Gulf. There are also 3 levels of difficulty to choose from and they combined with the theater choice will set up number and kinds of enemies for you to defeat. Each mission has primary and secondary targets, specific victory conditions and weather. so after the initial briefing, it's wise to put a little attention towards arming your ship properly for the challenge ahead. If you ever find yourself low on fuel or armament, you can always return to home base mid-mission to resupply, but it's obviously best to sail out prepared rather than worry about that later. The game controls are a mixture of keyboard commands and joystick movement, and will take a while to get used to. If I can recommend something, if you have a friend with you, or Batman, your choice, it's cool to play it together with one of you on the joystick and the other at the keyboard. It's not a multiplayer game by design, but it's actually pretty fun played like that. The game saves your progress in your portfolio only after mission is completed, and if you ever get killed during one of the missions, the portfolio is permanently closed and there is no way of recovering progress, so be aware of that. Other than that, just have fun. There are two versions of Outrun on C64, both made by the same people, a European one and one from across the pond. The first, in my opinion, has better Ferrari F40 sprite graphics and a brunette sitting next to our driver. Second has a blonde, same as in the arcade, and smaller, less detailed car sprite. But other than that, they're very similar, and picking one or the other is largely down to personal choice. What they both do have though is incredibly good renditions of arcade original music tracks. I mean, Magical Sun Shower is just great, but Splash Wave is stunning. It's on another level. Sid Chip is a little chip that actually could. C64's version of Splash Wave is my favorite out of all, even better than the arcade one. And if you disagree, you can send your angry email directly to my assistant at notbrucewayne@batman.com. All the scenes from the original Outrun are present in C64 Sport, although without the branching routes, and the game overall plays quite well, even if not perfect. It is however easily the best version out of all 8-bit ones, short of Master System, and it's even better than the horrendous Amiga port. And if not for the obvious cuts that had to be made to fit Outrun within C64's capabilities, like roadside objects for instance, it would have been a perfect port. All in all, if you like arcade racers, and Outrun in particular, you'll find something in C64's version to enjoy. If you don't, however, then nothing, even stellar music tracks won't change your mind about it. The Fairy Tail Adventure is an action role-playing that was pretty popular on the Amiga, but remained largely unknown on C64. It is mind-numbing thousands of unique screens in size, for whatever the reason in the past game worlds were measured in the screens. Given C64's resolution though, it would have probably fit in like 3/4 in today's 4K. That said, the game is a big one, especially for the smaller 8-bit machine that the Commodore was. And for better or worse, as in best titles in a genre, from ground up you can basically go anywhere. Even somewhere where you've no chances of survival, which some may consider a downside, but I enjoy having freedom of choice. Anyway, gameplay revolves around three brothers who are on the quest of recovering a stolen by the forces of evil talisman and returning it to their home village, Tembri. Interestingly enough, you control only one of the three, and are allowed control of another only if the earlier brother failed. I don't think that's a system that I've seen in a game before, and other than Cannon Fodder, I'm not sure I've seen it since at all. Power at Sea is a 3D novel action strategy and not a simulation for once. The game takes place on the Pacific in 1944 and you're commanding a small strike fleet. You have 96 hours to secure and capture small islands in Liet Gulf, and to do so you have to first destroy the land cannons and bunkers and then send landing boats with troops ashore. Oh my god. My notes for the video, which Batman once again did not proof check, little rascal that he is, said that you had to send landing boars and not boats. And while I might have said it correctly just now, the thought of a unit of landing boars is something that will keep haunting me for the next few days. I mean, can you imagine them jumping off of a boat in a full gear on the shore with madness in their eyes just to completely ignore the enemy and start searching for truffles? Anyway, as you go about it all, you also defeat enemy battleships and carriers with your fighters and anti-aircraft guns. If it sounds odd, don't worry, once you master the controls it's actually really fun and playable and will keep you at the edge of your seat all the way through, whether you succeed or not. It is worth noting that Power at Sea is C64 exclusive and cannot be experienced on any other system of the time. Also, the only game in existence featuring landing boars, I must add. Professional BMX Simulator is an expanded version of the same game from 1986, but without the professional in the title. And for the most part it is just that, improved and refreshed game. And that's the best way of describing it, cause it's nothing more than that really. The most apparent change as compared to the original is that there are 4 riders now on each track, controlled by either humans or AI. And there's always 4 of them, regardless how many people are playing. It didn't change however that you don't really race against them, but have to make a certain number of laps within given time to progress. Secondly, an expert difficulty option was added that changed the time given to complete the laps to be even more restrictive and added possibility to change tire types and chain wheel sizes. so that you could switch them between the races on dirt, concrete or sand. Perhaps it made a difference, I never cared to check honestly, and why you may wonder? It's cause I thought that there wasn't enough changes to mark a completely new separate game, and I wasn't too big on the first one anyway. Sure, both are good, especially that they were budget releases. This one's better than the last, but not good enough to steal my playtime from dozens of other better C64 games. Alien Syndrome is a top-down view action shooter that, like many games of the late 80s, is a conversion from the arcades. In essence, you have to get your way through increasingly difficult levels, saving captured scientists and fighting off hordes of deadly aliens. Each consecutive level is more demanding and each ends with a boss fight. All bosses being unique and challenging experiences on their own. If I was to complain about something, and there is one thing, I'd say that the scrolling solution used in the game is criminal. The screen only ever scrolls when you move very close to the edge of it, same as it does in DOS version, which as you may correctly guess poses a huge risk to your health, and in a hectic shooter is just a bad game design. Despite that, Alien Syndrome is actually pretty fun and much more enjoyable when played with a friend in a simultaneous multiplayer rather than alone staring at the sad blinking screen. An evil alien species called the Bido attacked Earth somewhere in the mid-22nd century. The planet was not the first, countless thousands of others fell to Bido before, and as long as any planets could sustain life, they were interesting to the attackers. Humanity has sent the best they had to counter the threat, but they all failed. All but one. You were having a dinner with your mother-in-law and she's a vicious person. I mean, you've battled many different aliens or even terrorists here on Earth, but no one could compare to that woman. She's a scourge. So you couldn't miss the dinner just to shoot at some buddies. But as soon as it was over, your phone rang and it was obvious that once again you're the last line of defense, last hope for us all. You jumped into the last R9 fighter ship armed with all the experimental weapons you could get your hands on and headed off to save humanity. This is how cult classic R-Type started. Cause we know how it ended with your undeniable success. But before you won, you had to battle through 8 increasingly more demanding stages. Fortunately, you had a very powerful charging plasma gun, and along the way you picked up different upgrades that definitely made the whole venture easier. Not easy, easier. R-Type is one of the most important and well-known shooters of the 80s and also one of the best horizontally scrolling ones. So if you're a fan of a genre, you no doubt know of it already. Oh, and Batman's asking me to tell you that he had the R-Type cabinet in his Batcave, and he enjoyed his Bat evenings drinking Bat coffee and playing it. Wasteland is a post-apocalyptic role-playing game set in California after World War III nuclear holocaust. You're in control of a band of desert rangers traversing from town to town and gradually uncovering a sinister plot threatening the survival of the little that's left of mankind. At the start you can either create a whole party of characters or alternatively just your main one and recruit companions along your travels from inhabitants of the titular Wasteland. The game world is viewed from the top-down perspective and all the combat encounters are turn-based. There are many things that the Wasteland does better than most games of the time or even some of the modern ones too. For one, character development is not class-locked and instead you're periodically given points to redistribute amongst attributes and skills. More so, skills get better as you use them, same as in real life. I mean, even Batman was not a Dark Knight straight away. He started as Dawn Scout, then progressed through Sunny Apprentice and Dusk Warrior to eventually become the Dark Knight. It takes time. Anyway, some in-game encounters and engagements will allow for few or even just a single of your band members to partake in, making Wasteland for a very individual feeling, even if overall party-based experience. It's one of the best games of the era and one of the most important ones in history of gaming overall. Rackham is a billiard simulator and a pretty good one at that. As far as I remember, cause today, playing it 30 years later, as you can see, I have no idea what I'm doing. So you gotta trust me that it's not bad. It features 5 different games with the rules accurately recreated for the late 80s. So there's pool, 8-ball, 9-ball, bumper pool and snooker. Why do I mention that they've been recreated to the 80s standards? Cause honestly, I haven't played either of these in years and don't know if anything changed. I know it's unlikely, but in the same time not impossible. Rackham includes an in-game editor for the bumper pool mode, so that you can create any and all scenarios you'd like to practice. The physics generally speaking are pretty good and the game feels as close to real life as possible on an 8-bit system. Unless you're myself today, then it feels odd to say the least. What I don't like about it is the lack of CPU opponents, so you can only either play as both or have to have someone with you, which is not easy in 2020s. Rogue originally came out in 1980 and featured ASCII characters to represent all the dungeon's denizens. It was an interesting year, no doubt about that, but Commodore received its port in 1988. 8 years, even in the 80s, was a long time. And while the ASCII characters replaced by the graphics are a nice touch, the rest of the game didn't change at all. Your ultimate goal is to travel through dozens of randomly generated dungeons and find the Amulet of Yendor. And while the gameplay itself is anything but shallow and you still get to experience many different monsters, items, weapons, scrolls and secrets that you'll find along the way, in 1988 gamers expected a lot more meat on the bones. And Rogue, despite being the title responsible for creation of a whole roguelike genre, didn't offer any improvements on the original other than the presentation. Sure, it's a fun game for those who like this particular style of games, but most others couldn't care less for it, especially 8 years after they managed to forget about the original. It's a good game, but it released way too late to have any real impact on C64's gaming scene. Cinemaware, developers of Rocket Ranger, were known on the Amiga for their excellent and interactive movie-like experiences that were leagues ahead of the competition in terms of storytelling, design, and most importantly graphics. They also often mixed genres, especially action-adventure with strategy, to create unusual and memorable titles. Rocket Ranger is more action-oriented than strategic, but despite that, it's an interesting and enjoyable game. I'm happy to admit that on Commodore, same as on the Amiga, it looks amazing. It clearly squeezes out as much out of C64's power as you do out of lemons and limes making those sweet drinks that you do. And it plays as well as those drinks of yours go down. Sure, it's not on Amiga's level, but there's a generational leap between the systems, and it could be argued that it looks as good on C64 as some of those early Amiga games did. Those that were not made by Cinemaware at least. Story-wise, in Rocket Ranger you play as titular hero fighting against Germans during Second World War, and it's loosely based on Rocketeer comic books. And while it's a decent game, it's nowhere near remotely near gameplay-wise as compared to other of Cinemaware's titles. Red Storm Rising is a submarine simulation based on Tom Clancy's novel by the same title, and it takes place in the Norwegian Sea where you take control of a hunter-killer submarine performing various missions loosely based on the campaign described in the book. Legendary Sid Meier co-designed the game, meaning you can expect nothing less than a stellar gameplay. And as with most games he dipped his toes in, the game is based around the score awarded at the endgame along with appropriate rank. What's worth mentioning is that the successes and failures of the player actually reflect on the state of the region is in during gameplay and eventually the outcome of the whole war. So each mission is important, and while some can be lost, it's preferable to aim as high as possible. The game was well received and widely appreciated by the fans of the genre, often cited as being the best and most realistic simulation of the time, that gave players unprecedented amount of control over all of the ship's internal systems. Even if you're not a fan of simulations, given that Sid Meier was involved, I believe that it's at the very least worth checking out once. Mines of Titan is an early turn-based tactical role-playing by then widely unknown Westwood associates, that still had few more years to go before they would become a household name with their Command & Conquer series. Mines of Titan takes place in 2261 when humans have long been colonizing the inner solar system and are about to finish terraforming Titan, Saturn's largest moon. You're Tom Jetland, as opposed to Tom Jet Takeoff, and due to an unforeseen event you crash land on Titan. The last name is a coincidence. With no means of transport and no money, you must find a way to get out of this godforsaken rock. So, to raise funds, you must search for and recruit characters for your party to explore and survive the unforgiving world of Titan. You train and develop your character and his companions by upgrading over 20 different skills, which all come in handy in both side and main missions. Quests themselves revolve around mysteries of Titan, uncovering vast conspiracies and telling the fate of disappeared colony. Many of the enemies you'll encounter have special abilities, so the combat is quite tactical, with you planning your attacks and how to respond to the enemies if they can be countered beforehand at all. Interestingly enough, Mines of Titan is one of the few early role-playing games that gave you a complete freedom of choice when it comes to who to attack. You can go for the innocent and poor if you'd like, as much as you can aim high and try your luck with the police, cause they drop one of the most powerful armors in the game, so it may end up being worth the risk. For all intents and purposes, Pac-Mania is Pac-Man in isometric view with differently themed mazes in different levels. As opposed to original Pac-Man, however, Pac-Mania does not show entire maze all at once, but just a part that scrolls along with the Pac-Man itself. This at first may seem like a huge difficulty bump, but in reality the game's much easier than the predecessor, so it's not really an issue. Pac-Mania was released on nearly every system available in the late 80s and gained a decent fanbase. And generally speaking, very positive recognition on all of these. So if you don't mind playing something that's not quite up to standard of Miss Pac-Man, but also it's not far off, Pac-Mania is a fun game to waste some time on. I'm recording this quietly so that my assistant wouldn't hear us. He's very sensitive when it comes to games covering his shenanigans and his image. And I wouldn't want to hurt his feelings, as he is, after all, Batman the Caped Crusader. Although I gotta say that the last few weeks that he's been working here pro bono, as my right hand, my confidant and my assistant all rolled into one, he's been acting more like Batman the Donut Muncher or Batman the Couch Sitter. Anyway, the game we're covering now is a mixture of arcade and adventure genres unlike any other. The entirety of the gameplay takes place in panels looking as if they were torn out of the comic book, so whenever you change a location, a new of those panels opens up. The action part involves going around the city, fighting off endless waves of bodies and solving simple puzzles to find clues that would help you solve one of the two scenarios available in the game. And while personally I don't enjoy the way the fighting is portrayed in Batman, it's definitely an interesting title, one of the, if not the best Batman game of the last couple of years of 1980s. And most of all, a treat to all fans of the world's greatest detective. Ooh-wee, guys, I think he didn't hear us. What, Bruce? Nah, we're not talking about you, buddy. Don't worry about it. Keep eating the ice cream. Ultima 5 is the 5th title in Richard Garriott's series of role-playing games. Once again, you're Avatar, and once again you have to save Lord British and Britannia in the process. The country is ruled by a ruthless tyrant Blackthorn, who enforces virtues on the populace, corrupting their meaning in the process and effectively creating a fantasy police state, where adhering to the virtues is punishable by death. Ultima 5 uses the same engine as the previous title did, and most of the gameplay mechanics like turn-based combat are unchanged as well. There are some novelties though. Cities for one are considerably expanded and many unique items and buildings are represented graphically now. You can push and pull certain objects and there's a full working day-night cycle. And finally, dialogue trees are more detailed and feature various topics. If you're a fan of RPGs, I really don't have to say more. If you're not, Ultima is unlikely to change your mind because of its very simple aesthetics. This second episode of our C64-centric series for 1988 is probably the weirdest video I've made. Not only you got to meet my assistant / unpaid intern, but also watch a selection of quite a few really fun games. Some of which we've seen on other systems, as by 1988 cross-releases were quite common. So, let me know what you think. Were the games something you'd be interested in playing? Is my undeniable descent into insanity progressing too rapidly? Do we really need another Batman movie? These questions and more is what we can discuss in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not. Other than subscribing and hitting the bell, that is. That bell is amazing, as whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. Thank you. They're all amazing and stars among the retro community and deserve your subscription. They all have mine. You will find the names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.